Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Matt Galvin. I'm the Managing Director for Polestar. Two bits of good news. Number one is I don't have any slides. Number two is that I'm all that stands between you and your lunch. So I'll take just the next 10 minutes to talk about what the carrots and sticks are, I guess, in terms of the automotive industry and the policymakers to try and help this transition that we all need to make towards e-mobility. And I suppose I want to start with a question, really, which is, what is the overarching goal of society? And indeed, what does society want from the motor industry? I suppose a sustainable future relies in part, of course, on the mass adoption of electric vehicles. And for this to happen, customers need confidence and incentives to make the transition. Part of this question has also been answered by our policymakers in government, and what we are left with is a mandate which has, from my perspective at least, all of the sticks and none of the carrots. So what are the sticks? Well, the biggest one aimed at OEMs is the ZEV mandate, which you've probably heard of, which stipulates that manufacturers must sell a minimum of 22% of their cars as BEVs, battery electric vehicles, in 2024, and this rises to 80% by 2030. The failure to meet these objectives carries a fine of up to £15,000 per car, so quite a significant stick. And from a customer perspective, the stick comes in the form of banning sale of petrol and diesel cars by 2035. So there's an obvious mismatch between the legislation governing car manufacturers and the rule informing customers' decision as to when they make the switch. Labour's manifesto committed to aligning the two by bringing forward the ban on sale of ICE vehicles to 2030, but no word yet on where they're likely to execute on this particular part of their manifesto. Let's be clear, electric vehicles are still in their relative infancy in terms of their acceptance and ultimately cost, which has been referenced today. And it will take time for manufacturers to reduce their costs as technology improves and becomes more widely available. The advent of new technology quite often creates a them and us divide, vinyl versus CD, CD versus digital streaming. But the stakes are much higher when we're facing a climate emergency. In this scenario, the environment is the stick and convenience is the carrot. Technology has made us, dare I say it, lazy, and convenience rules out pretty much always. But as far as sticks go, the environment is more of a tree trunk of necessity. And actually, when it comes to EVs, convenience is becoming less of an issue with every day. There are now over 65,000 charging points across the UK, which equates to around one charger for every 17 EVs. And I know Vicky's done a lot of work earlier to back up some of these stats. Hers are probably more accurate than mine. And this is on a similar level to that of fuel pumps to cars. But of course, dwell time when charging, or when fueling is lower. But let's not forget that somewhere around 90% of all charging is done at home. The legislation that forced CPOs to equip all new charging stations with contactless payment has certainly made these barriers lower when it comes to charging publicly. At Polestar, we've stopped talking about range anxiety and replaced it with the term charge anxiety, which again was referenced on the earlier panel. And you can easily exceed over 300 miles per charge in the real world, and I'm not talking here about WLTP figures. That means it's only an issue if you struggle to find a charger or working charge point, and let's be clear, this is improving every day. I often deal with range anxiety debate with our customers and simply say, don't worry, the car will outrun your bladder. Certainly it's true for me anyway. And it's this simple messaging which allows the penny to drop and it all makes sense. Range is good enough now that you will have to stop before the car does. This year, we worked with StoreDot and charged a Polestar 5, which is an up-and-coming Super GT, from 10% to 80% in under 10 minutes. This was a technology demonstration, but it's also going to be coming to us in the very near future. And then, of course, again, as referenced earlier, we hear complaints that EVs are too expensive, and Polestar will always operate at the premium end of the market. So we won't be trying to bring out an affordable EV anytime soon. But so many mainstream brands are doing this, And this also won't be a question in the not too distant future. So from a customer perspective, ultimately we get to a place where we don't need to talk about carrots or sticks. It will become the norm. So that addresses the customer side, but what about the carrots and sticks affecting the industry? In terms of the carrots, a further carrot is the green economy, which tends not to get the airtime it needs. The UK's low-carbon economy is now worth more than £200 billion, almost 4 times the size of the country's manufacturing sector, with growth expected to accelerate in the coming years, according to the IPCC. And that also equates to 1.2 million jobs in the UK. So the green economy is certainly an area that we can be proud of. The UK has many of the world's best engineers in the automotive industry, and we could lead the world on EVs with the right stimulus. I'm encouraged to see that our new government is already lifting the ban on onshore wind farms. In the UK, we at Polestar employ 400 engineers who are developing new products coming soon to your drives. And why here? Well, because we have the best bonded aluminium know-how globally, and these are world-class products breaking new ground like the charging speed I mentioned earlier. The UK can lead the world EV ecosystem with the right stimulus and with highly skilled jobs for the future. We have the motoring heritage that we are so proud of, and now we need to build on this for the next iteration. Not an evolution, but a revolution. I also recognise the irony of me standing here talking about the ZEV mandate when I head up a UK pure EV company. But we do like to look at the bigger picture, and the ultimate stick, a mandate for the next few years, with this year requiring all OEMs to ensure 22% of their cars are pure EVs, rising to 80% by 2030, is something that I can't ignore. To instigate such drastic change in an industry which has been in operation now on 140 years, using similar technology throughout, with so many skilled jobs, is quite the ask. But what I see is an industry of the finest thinkers and problem solvers, and what they need is certainty, with a plan and a timeline to work to. This simply does not exist. We have already had the pure EV rollback from 2030 to 2035, and with a recent change in government, there is a plan to U-turn the U-turn of the plan. Personally, I joined Polestar because it has a clear vision to do the right thing in the industry and drive towards net zero. And we are bold enough to aim to produce a car with net zero carbon from well to gate, an unheard of goal in the industry, but I maintain everyone needs certainty to make this work. The launch of our newest car, the Polestar 4, sees us produce an EV with the lowest carbon emission from manufacturing to date at 19.9 tonnes. We also invest in biofuels for the ships that transport our cars, ensuring that 25% of the fuel consumed in the logistics chain is renewable. And we're not alone. Many EV makers are making similar strides to improve on their carbon footprints and make tangible progress towards net zero. But where is the carrot from the policymakers? So we've covered a lot of the sticks and what car manufacturers are doing to move the game forward. But in terms of the mandate, where on earth is the carrot? The UK is amongst the worst countries for any type of private retail incentive to make more electric cars and the move to electric easier, i.e. we have nothing. We have a complete imbalance where the manufacturers are being clobbered, but with nothing being done to balance up the demand. Do we want handouts? No, absolutely not. But we do want help to stimulate the market for a period of time to allow people to at least have their fair choice. Our key request is in line with the SMMT, and one of those is halving the VAT on new EVs and bringing public charging in line with home charging from a VAT perspective at least to 5%. It is estimated, and this is a stat from Faircharge, that to reduce VAT on charging would only cost the government £18.4 million at the current rates of EV adoption. A temporary halving of VAT for new EVs has also been mooted by the SMMT and other lobbyists. And of course, you would expect me to support that, wouldn't you? Which I do. But I maintain that we are not looking for handouts. We must shoulder some of the educational task to reassure people that EVs can work for them. But undoubtedly, this has to be supported by fiscal policy to assist the public with that decision to transition to EVs. We need to create momentum and review the negative rhetoric around EVs by more and more people living with them to prove it's not as scary as the press make out. Also, I would argue that the ZEV mandate is creating an artificial market which is not based on the real demand, and real demand is the only way to ensure a solid market for the future. And this should be better served with help for people wanting to make the change. All these points add up to a very compelling argument for support, and this is even before we've talked about air quality in our cities. We take this issue very seriously, and our actions speak louder than words. I've already mentioned the achievement with Polestar 4, but it now takes 3 tonnes less CO2e to create the Polestar 2 versus 3 years ago when we first started producing it. So the progress is tangible, and like I said, other brands and other OEMs and other manufacturers are also making similar strides. And I'll leave you with this thought. The annual mortality of human-made air pollution in the UK is roughly equivalent to between 28 and 36,000 deaths every year. It is estimated between 2017 and 2025 that the total cost for the NHS and social care system of air pollutants, fine particulate matter and nitrogen oxide, for which there will be more robust evidence for an association, will be around £1.6 billion. It makes the 18.4 million to balance the VAT on public charging look like an absolute bargain of an investment. And if it just reduces a small share of the financial burden on our air quality is causing, that's got to be a great carrot and not the stick for the government to introduce. Thank you very much.